a country languishing under countless sanctions, that very same Russia is beating all economic expectations, so much so that it is now once again a high-income country.
Despite facing over 16,000 sanctions, Russia has remarkably managed to sidestep the US dollar and sustain a booming economy. Recently, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, projected that Russia's economy would grow by 3.2% this year, outpacing advanced economies like the UK, France, and Germany. How is that even possible? Well, it seems Russia found a way to sidestep the sanctions and even went a step further to have a better economy than it has had in many years. The IMF highlighted that Russia's oil exports have remained steady and government spending has been high, contributing to this growth. Additionally, the World Bank upgraded Russia to a high-income country, noting a significant increase in economic activity. The resilience of Russia's economy, despite intense global pressure, raises intriguing questions about the future of international trade and the diminishing dominance of the US dollar. How has Russia managed to turn the tide in its favor? Hello everyone, my name is Yernar, and today we will try to figure out how the Russian economy is surviving the wartime and handling all the sanctions that were imposed on it. So hit the like button and subscribe, it will really help my channel grow. Let's start with sanctions. Restrictions imposed on Russia have been some of the most extensive and severe in modern history. One of the most impactful sanctions was the freezing of approximately $300 billion of Russia's foreign currency reserves, which is about half of its total reserves. These seized reserves are now worth about $350 billion. Additionally, around 70% of the assets of Russian banks were frozen, and several major banks were excluded from the SWIFT financial messaging system. The sanctions targeted Russia's lucrative oil and gas industry, which is a significant source of revenue. The US and UK banned Russian oil and natural gas imports, while the EU imposed a ban on seaborne crude imports and set a price cap of $60 per barrel on Russian crude oil. This was intended to reduce Russia's earnings from energy exports, which are crucial for funding its military operations. Technology and trade were not spared. Export restrictions were placed on technology that could be used for military purposes, and imports of gold, diamonds, and other valuable commodities from Russia were banned. The EU alone banned over $48 billion in goods that would have been exported to Russia and $91.2 billion in goods that would have been imported from Russia. In 2022, the economy shrank by 2.1%. Which, while significant, was not the catastrophic collapse many had predicted. The sanctions did lead to a decline in oil and gas revenues and caused disruptions in various sectors, but Russia managed to find ways to mitigate some of the impacts. By 2023, Russia seemed to have adapted to these sanctions, and this is where things got interesting. First, let's talk about the social adaptation the country has gone through. If you visit Russia today, you will be surprised that the country is doing just fine, and you can still get products from companies that have left the country. For example, Apple products are supposed to be unavailable to Russia since Apple already stopped shipping to Russia, right? That is not the case because you can get any Apple product you want in Russia, including the latest iPhones. CNBC was surprised to find the Apple Vision Pro on sale in Moscow even before they were available in London and Paris. Some US brands, like Burger King and Marks & Spencer, are supposed to leave the country based on these sanctions, but they are tied to complex franchise agreements that make it difficult to completely withdraw. These agreements often mean that local operators continue to run the businesses under the original brand names. And for companies like KFC that have sold their businesses to Russian operators, nothing has changed. The products have remained the same KFC products but just rebranded to Rustics. Russia has legalized parallel imports, allowing retailers to bring in products from abroad without the trademark owner's permission. This means that goods from brands like Zara and others can still be found in Russian stores, even though the companies have officially pulled out. More important is how Russia still manages to make money from energy sales without transacting in US dollars. Two figures stand out as the architects of Russia's economic resilience: Elvira Nabiullina, the governor of the Central Bank of Russia, and Maxim Reshetnikov, the Minister of Economic Development. Elvira Nabiullina is no stranger to the high-stakes world of economic warfare. Appointed as the governor of the Central Bank of Russia in 2013, she has navigated the turbulent waters of international sanctions with a deft hand. Under her leadership, the central bank has implemented a series of bold measures to stabilize the Russian economy. She tightened monetary policy, raised interest rates, and introduced capital controls to prevent a financial meltdown. The international community is admitting that her role is making Russia immune to sanctions. One advantage Russia has is its incredibly vast amounts of natural resources. It makes it easy for the country to sustain itself in a lot of ways, but even more important is the fact that a lot of countries also depend on these resources. Europe finds itself trapped between depending on Russia for a lot of these resources and sanctioning the Kremlin. Russia is one of the world's largest producers of oil and natural gas. It holds the largest natural gas reserves globally and is the second largest exporter of crude oil. These resources have been a cornerstone of its economy, providing significant revenue through exports. Before the sanctions, Russia supplied about 40% of the EU's natural gas and 27% of its crude oil. This dependency created a complex economic relationship, where Europe needed Russian energy to power its industries and homes, while Russia relied on the revenue from these exports to sustain its economy. In terms of trade, the overall volume between the EU and Russia has drastically reduced. Between the first quarter of 2021 and the second quarter of 2024, the value of EU imports from Russia fell by 87%, and exports to Russia dropped by 55%. The EU's trade deficit with Russia, which peaked at 45.7 billion in the second quarter of 2022, has now fallen to 0.9 billion in the first quarter of 2024. This dramatic reduction in trade reflects the EU's efforts to diversify its energy sources and reduce dependency on Russian hydrocarbons. However, Russian liquefied natural gas imports have seen a slight increase, with France, Spain, and Belgium being the major importers. The Kremlin has solved most of these trade deficits by moving to new markets. China and India are at the forefront of this shift, as both nations have significantly increased their trade with Russia. To entice new buyers, Russia is trading most of its resources at a discount, and the Asian giants are happy to take advantage of these discounts. India has recently overtaken China to become the world's largest importer of Russian oil. In July 2024, India imported a record 2.07 million barrels per day of Russian crude oil, accounting for 44% of its total oil imports. The value of Indian imports from Russia has grown nearly tenfold, from around 4.7 billion in 2022 to approximately 41 billion in 2023. India's trade with Russia is not limited to oil. It also includes fertilizers and other commodities, helping to control inflation and keep fuel prices low in India. Meanwhile, China remains a major trading partner for Russia, with bilateral trade reaching a record $200 billion in 2023. More than 90% of trade between China and Russia is conducted in their respective national currencies, the yuan and the ruble, demonstrating a significant move towards de-dollarization. Both China and India have been actively working to reduce their reliance on the US dollar in their transactions with Russia. This shift is part of a broader trend among BRICS nations to de-dollarize their economies. This move has been facilitated by bilateral currency swap agreements and the increasing internationalization of the yuan. China's share of global payments in yuan has risen from 1.9% in January to 3.6% by October 2023. India has also been settling a significant portion of its trade with Russia in rupees and rubles. This arrangement allows both countries to bypass the US dollar and mitigate the impact of Western sanctions. The increased trade and de-dollarization efforts have significant strategic implications. By increasing trade with Russia and reducing reliance on the US dollar, both countries enhance their geopolitical leverage and strategic autonomy. To move these resources, shipment is needed, and this is another area where sanctions are at play against Russia. The Kremlin swiftly adapted, employing a shadow fleet of tankers to circumvent maritime regulations and continue exporting oil to willing buyers in Asia. This fleet, operating outside the official maritime sector, became a crucial lifeline, enabling Russia to maintain its oil exports despite the sanctions. Another commodity Russia is leveraging on is gold. Unlike other commodities, gold is notoriously difficult to track once it enters the global market. This precious metal can be melted down, recast, and resold, making it an ideal asset for countries looking to circumvent economic restrictions. It is a form of money, but one which is hard to regulate. By 2022, Russia had pegged its currency, the ruble, to gold, effectively insulating its economy from the volatility of the dollar and other Western currencies. This move was not just about economic stability, it was a strategic pivot to make the ruble a credible substitute for gold on the global stage. By 2023, Russia's gold production had soared to 324.7 tons, making it the second largest producer globally, just behind China. This surge was no accident. Russia had invested heavily in its mining infrastructure, ensuring that its gold production could increase by approximately 4% annually until at least 2026. This growth trajectory is not just about quantity, but also about quality and efficiency in extraction and processing. The increase in gold production is part of a broader strategy to diversify Russia's economic dependencies. By boosting gold output, Russia aims to reduce its reliance on oil and gas exports, which are more susceptible to international sanctions and market fluctuations. Gold, with its universal value and liquidity, provides a stable and secure asset that can be traded globally, often under the radar of international regulators. There are several ways countries use to circumvent the import of goods, even when there is a restriction in place. Using these tricks, Russia has continued importing goods from countries that have imposed sanctions on it, such as Britain and Germany. This process is known as parallel imports or grey market imports. This involves importing goods into intermediary countries, which then re-export them to Russia. For Russia, the intermediary countries include Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Armenia, which have seen significant increases in their trade volumes as a result. Between March and December 2022, Russia imported approximately $20 billion worth of goods through Kazakhstan. This includes a wide range of products, from consumer electronics to luxury vehicles. The demand for warehouse space in Kazakhstan has surged, with Russian logistics companies and retailers seeking almost 400,000 square meters of space to facilitate these imports. Armenian exports to Russia increased by a staggering 463% between 2022 and 2023, reaching over 328 million euros. This surge is largely attributed to Armenia acting as a transshipment point for goods destined for Russia. The US has accused several Armenian firms of redirecting restricted items to Russia, leading to sanctions on these companies. Russia has continued to import luxury cars such as Mercedes-Benz through these intermediary countries. In 2023, Russia registered 75,626 imported vehicles, many of which were re-exported from countries like Kazakhstan and Armenia. Azerbaijan is in the circumvention loop too. UK car exports to Azerbaijan have skyrocketed by approximately 2,000%. This dramatic rise has positioned Azerbaijan as the 12th largest market for British cars, surpassing traditional markets like Switzerland, Canada, and Spain. As you can guess, these cars eventually end up in Russia. The average value of cars exported to Azerbaijan in early 2024 was over 115,000 British pounds or $152,000, indicates a high demand for luxury vehicles. The British car industry has defended this surge by claiming that Azerbaijan is a flourishing market in its own right. They attribute the increase to factors such as new model launches and pent-up demand, which obviously is not the case. This claim contrasts with economic data showing that Azerbaijan's GDP per capita has remained relatively flat for over a decade. In the future, a key to Russia's success would be to pivot towards strengthening economic ties with non-Western countries, particularly within the BRICS bloc, which is made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Looking ahead, the continued efforts of the BRICS nations to establish a more independent financial system could have profound implications for global trade and the US economy. If successful, the de-dollarization efforts could reduce the dominance of the US dollar in international transactions, potentially leading to a decline in its value and influence. This shift could reshape global economic dynamics, as countries within the BRICS bloc and beyond might increasingly prefer to trade in their own currencies or a new BRICS currency. As the BRICS bloc continues to grow and assert its economic influence, the traditional dominance of Western financial systems may face unprecedented challenges, reshaping international trade and economic power structures in the years to come. However, experts believe the BRICS currency is unlikely to dislodge the dollar anytime soon. Although experts agree that you should definitely hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye bye.